The night of Monday, January 19, 2026, will forever be etched in the memory of the Gaiden Sarki community. What began as a quiet evening in this part of Tug Ward, within the Musawa local government area of Katsina state, descended into absolute terror. Under the cover of darkness, heavily armed men known locally as bandits stormed the village. They moved with a brutal efficiency that spoke of long practice, their intentions clear and violent. The sounds of gunfire ripped through the peaceful night, sending residents scrambling for safety in a desperate, chaotic bid to escape the unfolding horror that had so suddenly descended upon their homes. The attackers were not just interested in spreading fear, they came to kill, to steal, and to kidnap. As the assault continued, several residents lost their lives, their dreams and futures extinguished in a senseless act of violence. The exact number of casualties remains difficult to confirm, as the chaos of the attack and the subsequent mass exodus have made it nearly impossible for authorities to conduct a proper assessment. Beyond the tragic loss of life, the bandits rounded up more than 20 people, forcing them away from their families and into an unknown and terrifying captivity. It was a calculated act designed to inflict maximum pain and leverage fear for future ransoms. The rampage was not limited to human lives. The attackers also seized a significant amount of livestock, which represents the lifeblood and economic stability for many families in this agrarian community. For these rural households, losing their animals is akin to having their entire life savings stolen, plunging them into immediate and profound poverty. The theft of cattle, goats, and other animals is a common tactic used by these armed groups, crippling communities economically while funding their own violent operations. This multi-pronged assault left Gaiden Sarki not just bereaved and terrified, but also economically devastated and facing a long, uncertain road to recovery. The horror of that night was a brutal reminder of the vulnerability faced by so many communities in Nigeria's northwest. The attack was swift, merciless, and left a deep scar on the collective psyche of the people. They were targeted in their own homes, places that are meant to be sanctuaries of safety and peace. The bandits operated with impunity, seemingly unconcerned about any potential response from security forces. For the survivors, the immediate aftermath was a scene of devastation, mourning the dead, accounting for the missing, and grappling with the terrifying reality that their lives had been irrevocably shattered in the space of a few violent hours. What makes the attack on Gaiden Sarki even more tragic and honestly infuriating for the residents is that it happened under the supposed protection of a peace agreement. Local stakeholders in the Musawa local government area had reportedly entered into a peace deal with the very armed groups that terrorize the region. This agreement was intended to be a shield, a promise that communities like Gaiden Sarki would be spared from the violence that has plagued Katsina state for years. The hope was that dialogue and negotiation could achieve what military force had not, a lasting and sustainable peace that would allow people to live without constant fear for their lives. This recent wave of violence, however, has exposed the utter fragility and failure of such arrangements. The attack on Gaiden Sarki, as well as a separate assault in nearby Tuga town just 2 days earlier on January 17th, demonstrates that these peace deals are often not worth the paper they are written on. The bandits, it seems, view these truces as tactical pauses rather than binding commitments. They exploit the periods of calm to regroup, rearm, and plan their next offensive, leaving the communities who trusted in the process even more vulnerable than before. The very foundation of the agreement, trust, has been completely demolished by this betrayal. The community's reaction has been one of profound anger and deep-seated frustration. Residents are now openly questioning the wisdom behind negotiating with terrorists. What is the point of a peace deal if they can just come and kill us whenever they want? Is a sentiment echoed across the displaced families. This anger is not just directed at the bandits but also at the leaders and officials who championed the deal. To the victims, it feels like they were sold a false sense of security, their safety gambled away in a high-stakes negotiation that ultimately failed to protect them from harm, leaving them exposed and defenseless. This incident has amplified a wider, ongoing debate about the effectiveness of offering amnesty or striking deals with violent criminal groups. Critics, including organizations like the Coalition of Northern Groups, have long condemned such policies, arguing that they embolden the criminals and fail to address the root causes of insecurity. The release of dozens of captured bandits by the state government just a week prior to these attacks now looks like a catastrophic misjudgment. For the people of Gidan Sarki, the failed peace deal is not an abstract policy debate. It is a painful, lived reality written in the blood of their neighbors and the tears of their abducted family members. The immediate aftermath of the attack on Gidan Sarki was a mass exodus. The community, paralyzed by fear and the certainty that the bandits could return at any moment, simply abandoned their homes. Entire families, from the very young to the very old, packed what little they could carry and fled into the surrounding wilderness, seeking refuge wherever they could find it. The village now stands as a ghost town, its streets silent and its houses empty. The sense of community has been shattered, its people scattered by the winds of violence, their lives uprooted in a single night of terror. The conditions for these displaced families are dire and, honestly, heartbreaking. With nowhere else to go, many are now sleeping out in the open, completely exposed to the elements. They seek shelter in forests, under trees, and even in graveyards, hoping the sanctity of the dead might offer some protection from the living. Some have taken refuge on rooftops or inside abandoned wells, any place that feels safer than the homes they were forced to flee. Women, children, and the elderly are particularly vulnerable, facing the risks of illness, hunger, and further attacks without any form of protection or humanitarian aid. This displacement is driven by a deep and pervasive fear. The terror is not just a memory of the attack that happened, it is a constant, gnawing anxiety about the attack that could happen next. Every unfamiliar sound in the night, every rustle of leaves in the forest, brings a fresh wave of panic. Parents struggle to comfort their terrified children, who cannot comprehend why they can no longer sleep in their own beds. This psychological trauma is a profound and lasting wound, one that will persist long after the physical dangers have subsided. The fear is so intense that the prospect of sleeping outdoors feels safer than risking another night in their own homes. The social fabric of Gidan Sarki has been torn apart. Schools are closed, farms are untended, and the daily rhythms of life have come to a complete halt. The bonds that held the community together, shared work, celebrations, and mutual support, have been severed. People are now isolated, focused solely on survival. This is not just a temporary disruption, it is the systematic dismantling of a way of life. For the people of Gidan Sarki, the loss of their homes is compounded by the loss of their community, leaving them adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear, with no clear path back to the lives they once knew. As the survivors of the Gidan Sarki attack grapple with their loss and displacement, their suffering has been met with a deafening silence from the authorities. As of today, January 20th, 2026, neither the Katsina state government nor the state police command has issued an official statement. There has been no public acknowledgement of the lives lost, no update on the more than 20 people who were abducted, and no announcement of any rescue efforts or plans to secure the area. This official silence feels like a profound abandonment, leaving the victims to feel that their lives and their pain are invisible to those in power. This lack of response only deepens the community's sense of hopelessness. Without any word from the government, people are left to wonder if anyone is coming to help them. Are security forces being deployed? Are investigators working to track down the kidnappers? Is there any plan to provide relief for the hundreds of displaced families? The absence of information creates a vacuum that is quickly filled with fear and despair. It reinforces the perception that rural communities like Gidan Sarki are on their own, left to fend for themselves against heavily armed and ruthless criminal gangs. The attack on Gidan Sarki is not an isolated incident. It is part of a much larger, persistent pattern of violence that has turned vast areas of Katsina state into killing fields. For years, residents have endured a relentless cycle of banditry, mass abductions, and killings, despite repeated assurances from the government that the security situation is improving. Each new attack serves as a brutal contradiction to these official claims, proving that whatever strategies are being employed are failing to protect the most vulnerable citizens. The state, once known for its peace, is now defined by its insecurity. Ultimately, the people of Gidan Sarki and countless other communities across Katsina are trapped in a state of perpetual fear. They feel unsafe in their homes, unprotected by the state, and unheard by their leaders. The failure of the peace deal, followed by the silent indifference of the government, has crushed their hope for a secure future. This attack is more than just a headline, it is a devastating blow to a community's faith in the very idea of safety and governance. Until there is a decisive and effective response, the people will continue to sleep under the trees and in the graveyards, praying for a dawn that brings safety instead of more terror.